So welcome, Joel.
Yeah, I might have to translate though.
Yeah, but
Sometimes I think I understand, but you know,
yeah.
not perfectly. So
So I guess the stage is yours. And again, welcome, and you can move on the slides
sure, okay.
for everyone.
So I guess these are. So thank you. I'm hearing a feedback. Do you hear feedback or?
Yes, there is a feedback. Can everybody mute ourselves for now? That may be the
So okay, that sounds like it's better now, right? No. Okay. All right. So I guess these. So thank you, Laurent. Obviously, it's nice for us to be able to connect again, and also to invite me into your community. I appreciate that. I miss Paris. Oh, I can't fly there anymore because there are no flights. But this is another way to do it, I guess. So so I hope that what I talk about today you find provocative, maybe a little bit uncomfortable, because what I'm going to suggest is that a lot of what you think is true about marketing is true about the way marketing was, but and you could still do marketing the way you used to do marketing, but it's so far from optimal that I'm going to suggest that you move on from traditional marketing approaches. I'm going to present my case, my evidence. Hopefully you find it interesting, but then we, ask questions and we'll exchange ideas with respect to this. So marketing is transitioning, and there's a duality that goes on in marketing because media planners are still starting with the idea of how do I get the most reach for my media for the budget that I have to work with? How do I reach the most possible people, not have a lot of frequency? And my belief is that that's the best way of spending advertising. And some, well-respected people in the industry, Byron Sharp and Les Binet, they preach this. Well, that's kind of like marketing hasn't really changed because you could have said the same thing in the 60s, just keep buying TV shows with big ratings. However, there's something else that's going on in marketing, which is a real emphasis on targeting using the addressable capabilities of digital marketing. And the reason why you programmatically choose to serve advertising to some people and not others, or as one of my friends says, pick the cashews out of the bowl of mixed nuts, is because you know something about these people that makes some consumers more valuable to you potentially than others. So in the United States, about 80% of digital display is programmatic, which means people are bringing in knowledge about consumers that goes well beyond, just broad demographics. So I'm in that camp, and I'm going to explain why I think that's the transition that has to occur based on the data that I see. Well, the first thing is, so what's wrong with traditional marketing? It's okay. It's meh, as we would say. It's okay. It's also mysterious sometimes. Professor Mike Hanson's did a meta-analysis of what the responsiveness is in general to advertising, and the meta-analysis showed that the average elasticity is 0.1, meaning double your ad budget, get a 10% increase in sales. It's okay. It's marginally profitable, perhaps. It depends on the profit margin and so on, but it's certainly not exciting. But then there's the mystery. Professor Len Lodish from Wharton analyzed many case studies from behavior scan data in the United States, and he found that irrespective of creative or spending levels or whatever, half the studies didn't even show any lift. No lift whatsoever in sales. Why? You can always make up a story as to why, but the fact of the matter is it really was a mystery, because obviously marketers thought that 100% of these campaigns would be effective. So I don't think this is very good. So my question to the industry, my challenge is, how can we do better than this? So I think it starts by understanding that ad effectiveness is a three-legged stool, but one of the legs is a little wobbly. And what I mean by that is we all know the value of creative. We all know the value of doing marketing mix modeling and figuring out which tactics or channels are working better and putting more money against what's working better. But the third leg, which I think is actually the most important of all to understand, is the science of consumer segmentation. And it's really poorly understood by marketers. I've seen segments that are constructed that are given to media agencies or publishers that are just, they're pre-doomed to not produce strong return on investment. And it's because marketers just don't understand what the science is behind creating segments that will be, in fact, high performing. Now, the work that I've done suggests that if we can use the principles that I'm going to be talking about, if marketers can master segmentation, they actually can increase their ROAS, return on ad spending, by 50 to 100%. And that's on every campaign, 50 to 100%, because it's based on science. It's not based on the magic of catching lightning in a bottle with brilliant creative, which happens every 5 or 10 years, maybe. This is based on science of targeting that I'm going to be explaining that will, whatever the overall campaign return would have been, you should be able to increase it by 50 to 100%. So the first idea here is you have to change your mental model. Marketing still reinforces a top-down way of thinking. We think in terms of brand shares, we think in terms of reach, we think in terms of GRPs, you know, we think in terms of these average metrics, we think in terms of penetration, but we don't think in terms of the underlying differences that consumers have, the heterogeneity they have in their likelihood to respond to advertising, and whether or not there's a prediction science there. Can we identify ahead of time who's more likely to respond to advertising? So the first thing is think beyond the mean, think in terms of the distribution of individual consumers. So when I said before that the overall advertising elasticity is 0.1, that's a grand mean. Under that, there are segments of consumers. Some consumers are highly responsive to advertising, and their elasticity might be 0.4, meaning 40% increase in sales for a doubling of advertising impression or weight against those consumers. And then there are other consumers that are 3%, which would be highly unprofitable. And the reason why I made the size of these ovals different is because there's many more of the 3%ers than there is of the 40%ers. So the 0.1 is actually a weighted average of these underlying dynamics. So that's the little, you know, equation in the box. So the next question becomes, well, if we could figure out who the 3%ers are and the 40%ers are, why don't we spend more money against the 40%ers and less against the 3%ers? What would happen if we tried to do that? So it was published in 2017. I authored a white paper that was the result of a study I designed working with Viant, which is a large digital advertising network in the United States, and NCS, which is the joint venture between Nielsen and Catalina in the United States. Now, NCS has close to 200 million shopper identities in their frequent shopper data. So we were able to serve advertising to shoppers where we could then see what the results were, test versus control, against these shoppers in terms of their sales response to advertising. But what I did was I created a new segmentation framework that NCS had never used before. And it turned out that that new framework, I'm not going to explain all of it, but actually I can provide a link if you like to this white paper, and you can read the rest of it. But But what we found was using this new framework against a data set of 3 large CPG campaigns where ads were served to tens of millions of frequent shoppers, we found really amazing results that had not been seen before. So what we found is what's on the left. And what this says is when we classified people off of their prior 12 months of purchasing into these 4 buyer groups, heavy buyers of the brand, medium buyers, light buyers, and then of course non-buyers of the brand, and the great majority are always non-buyers of the brand. When we classified them that way, and then we ran the campaign and we looked at the results in the campaign period, the part we found that you might have expected is the orange line, which says people's preferences have a continuity to them. If you like the brand in the prior 12 months and you bought it a lot, you probably are going to buy the brand in any subsequent period also. So the sales rate was related to the prior purchasing. The thing we did not know that we would find, which was really interesting, was the blue line. The blue line is the increment, test versus control, those who saw the advertising versus not, the increment for each of these groups. And what you can see here is that the incremental sales response was actually roughly proportional to the baseline sales level for each of these groups. Now, I can tell you a lot of marketers didn't even believe this at first. They said, well, wait a minute, they were going to buy me anyway. Well, the answer is no. They would have bought you to a certain degree, and the incremental sales you get above that baseline is proportional to the fundamental probability of purchase that they have within each one of these groups. So what's really interesting about this is I think this totally changes this is the start of really changing your thinking. Because I don't know how many of you are familiar, for example, with the Byron Sharp philosophy of how brands grow, but his orientation is to focus on the non-buyers. Well, the non-buyers are pretty much guaranteed to be unprofitable. So really, it's a recipe for unprofitable advertising. Whereas directing your advertising disproportionately more, not completely, because you can't even do that. You can't even execute a plan that's only targeted to your current buyers, but advertising disproportionately more to your existing buyers, especially your heavy buyers, that's the secret to increasing your return on ad spend by 50 to 100%. The box on the right says that the heavy buyers, if you just looked at the heavy buyers of the brand versus the non-buyers, there literally was about a 10 times difference in return on ad spend. Now, when I went into the study to do the white paper, I was hoping I would see a 2x difference. You know, I said, if I see a 2x difference, I'm going to declare victory and it's going to be very big news. So when I saw 10x differences, I said, wow, this is really incredible. There are fundamental principles at work here that have never been discovered before. So that's really what what I'm sharing and what I'm harnessing. Now, the pushback, as I mentioned, is I spoke with the CMO of a leading retailer in the United States, and he said, well, why should I advertise to my heavy buyers? I mean, I'm already getting all their purchases, right? There's no room to grow. Well, the answer is no, that's not right. That the people who shop at your store are shopping at other stores, and it's different category by category, but there's a lot of sales that are up for grabs as people go shopping. Now, here's an example. I analyzed frozen food data from Numerator. Numerator does receipt scanning, so it's good. It's a good data source because it's continuous receipt scanning from consumers, so you can see their purchases over time. And it's all outlet, so there's no, because you don't need a retailer agreement to scan the receipts. The consumers do it. And what we found was that there's only about a 50% share of wallet from the heavy buyers for the brand that we were looking at. So more than half of your purchases are going somewhere else. We also found that from period to period, you don't even retain the same people as buyers 100%. So for example, even your heaviest buyers, your best customers, if you define them off of a pre-period and then you see what they do in the subsequent period, 30% of the heavy buyers did not even buy the brand in the next period. So when you advertise to your own buyers, especially your own heavy buyers, you get a much higher ROAS, you have the ability to build share of wallet, and you have the ability to build buyer retention, which is an important part of the equation as to how a brand is going to grow. Now, furthermore, what we found was that there's a lack of responsiveness on the part of never buyers. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we looked at the data and we broke it up into 3 time periods. So the people who were non-buyers in period 2, we went back to period 1 and we said, well, did they ever buy us in period 1? So we were able to differentiate non-buyers who were never buyers, they didn't buy us in period 1 either, from non-buyers who were buyers in period 1, so that they were lapsed buyers. They weren't completely out of the franchise, they just didn't buy you in period 2. And what we found was that although the lapsed buyers were only about 20% of the non-buyer pool, they accounted for well over 60% of the sales coming from non-buyers in the subsequent period. So in other words, the sales that you get from non-buyers really are coming from people who were still kind of part of your franchise. They might not have bought you in the last period, but they bought you at some point. So I think this makes a very strong case for why you should be first and foremost, targeting on to your own buyers. Now, there isn't just one buyer group definition that would work. Well, let me go to this first. So the first thing that this would lead us to believe is that if the proportions of consumers, as part of the general population, is that 20% might either buy you, have bought you, or bought you in the past, and 80% are never buyers, they haven't bought you, which would be pretty typical for a normal kind of a brand, then you're mostly wasting that 80% of ad impressions that are going to these never buyers. So what if we just change the pie chart and we could adjust these proportions through targeting so that, say, 50% of ad spending went to buyers and only 50% went to never buyers. So you can't, as I said, you can't get it down to 0, but you can make it less, reducing waste and increasing the overall average return on ad spend. So the media planning process that I coach my clients on is to think from a bottoms-up point of view, not a top-down point of view. Think of it in terms of the group that is going to be the most responsive to your advertising, then the next most responsive, then the next most, and your degree of media weight should be heaviest against those who are most responsive, then next heaviest among the next group. So basically at the point at which you start saturating your first segment, then money would start being allocated to the second segment. So these would be the kinds of groups that you would probably want to be thinking about: heavy buyers, medium brand buyers, lighter brand buyers, lapsed brand buyers. Heavy category buyers who've never bought your brand, they're kind of on the dividing line, they're on the bubble. But category buyers who've never bought your brand, you're going to lose money. So you really want to try and avoid them as much as possible. You can't avoid them completely, but reallocate spending from those people. Now, the other thing I should say is that category buyers who've never bought the brand, that's probably the largest segment in the consumer population. So there's a lot of room to take just some of the money away from them, allocate it to the more important responsive groups, and wind up with a much, much higher return on ad spend as a result. So if I kind of summarize what, when I was going for my MBA in economics at the University of Chicago, I had a great professor who said, if two theories sound different, but they always tell you to do the same thing, they're really not different at all. So what I'm trying to show here is what is different about what I'm talking about. So top-down marketing, it solves for reach. It's favoring mass media. So whether or not a particular channel works well in terms of sales response, if it delivers reach, that's the channel you're going to want to use to solve for reach. Bottom-up marketing solves for ad responsiveness, and it favors precision targeting. You will generate less reach with a bottom-up plan, but you're going to get much more return on ad spend. Top-down advertising assumes brand growth comes mostly from converting non-buyers. That's why you want to go out to a broad population. Bottom-up marketing assumes brand growth actually comes primarily from targeting your current buyers and unpacking the non-buyers and targeting those who are more likely to respond, lapsed buyers or lookalikes. Top-down marketing treats every consumer as being equal, because when you're trying to build reach as broadly as possible, the unstated assumption is every pair of eyeballs has about the same size wallet attached and has about the same size, interest in responding to your advertising, but that is totally not the case. So bottom-up marketing differentiates the value and puts more effort against the more valuable and, in particular, the more responsive consumers. So I think what I'm presenting here is evidence behind a very different theory and practice for how to go about marketing. And, hopefully you found it provocative and a little uncomfortable and found something interesting. But now it's your turn. And, I guess, Laurent, you'll be curating any questions that come from those who've been listening to me, but please in English would be better.
Merci, Joel. Thank you very much. I have questions, but I will probably leave the floor open to the friends and colleagues' questions if they have any to come up with. And allow you to actually step in if you want to be asking your first question. You have any questions, Jens? Okay. It's really interesting. I may start with mine then. It's really interesting because it's I think when you sent me your deck, I told you something, it's counterintuitive from what has been done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not so counterintuitive when you think about it. And it's really interesting because it seems that we've been doing things over and over because things have been done that way in the past. Whereas sometimes we should be reconsidering things in another manner to actually get things close. But obviously the data you share relate to CPG or packaged good manufacturers.
Right.
And I will very much relate to what you said. If we had a database of customers, we can actually reach out and actually reach and actually segment the database with heavy, medium, low, obviously, and actually push the heavy to actually do more things with us. But it's really, practically speaking, I'm an advertiser in a packaged good advertiser. I'm selling detergents typically, and my media outlet, my media reach is usually television and now the internet. Okay. And I'm not so familiar with the way people are going to be targeting people, but how do you find the people that are so-called the heavy buyers from the traditional media, I would say, segments that you're offered by the media industry? Why? Because if you want to be looking at finding, the heavy buyers, how are you going to be finding them? With the traditional media planning tools.
So that's your question. How do you find these people?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the United States, there are a couple of, there are three primary ideas. I was going to say two, mais jamais deux sans trois. So I have three. The first is in the United States, you have a few companies that have amassed very large frequent shopper databases. And those frequent shopper databases, I mean, when I say large, I mean, over 100 million identities, some over 200 million. Those frequent shopper databases are onboarded via a company like LiveRamp, so that if you want to work with, say, Nielsen Catalina or an IRI and say, I want to target the heavy buyers of my brand, they can execute that. So they would do that off of literal shopper data where they've recorded that information. Now, it's not perfect because they don't have all the outlets, but it's certainly, I mean, if I showed you other data that I was looking at from those experiments, you'd be very impressed how well it actually works and how predictable the patterns were from prior behavior to future behavior. But that would be one as frequent shopper. Now, a second one, I'm working with a company called Newstar, and I don't know if they operate in Europe or not, but Newstar has 172 segments that are defined by the combination of demographics and life stages.
Yeah.
And we're just finishing an experiment now where the brand we're analyzing has about a 10-to-1 market share difference from the best segments to the worst segments. So what happens is that in the best segments, where you have the highest market share, there's a certain underlying dynamic that where a brand is a big brand, there's much less waste because there are fewer non-buyers. So what happens is that if you take a smaller brand, but you use this targeting scheme and you target those demographic segments where it's actually a big brand,
Yeah.
then you get the benefits of a big brand in those segments by using that targeting. So that's number two. And then number three is there are, as I said, in the United States, you have LiveRamp, which is an onboarder, and they have a store where you can look for segments that might be interesting to you, where they, in effect, they're like resellers of segments from, Axiom and Experian and a whole bunch of other data aggregators, where lookalike modeling, if it's good, will provide another target that you can go after. But the caveat is if it's good. Not all segments in the LiveRamp store are nearly as good as they purport to be. So anyway, that's how you would do targeting. Now, in France, I mean, I don't know what you have in terms of pool frequent shopper data, but I'm sure, Carrefour must have a program. I mean, I'm sure there must be programs that you can tap in.
Yes, there are indeed. So, but and Carrefour and all the big distribution channels, indeed, and we have Axiom as well.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, we do. But I knew the answer, but it was one way to open it up actually.
Okay.
Okay, but thanks for getting in. I think Henri has a questions. If you want to.
Thank you, Laurent. Yeah, I have a question because at least in France, we see a lot of companies engaging themselves to raison d'être, to some of the engagement. They are claiming a lot of engagement. So what you presented is very interesting because it's a very new approach about marketing, but it still remains about addressing the masses and how to market to the masses. What I discovered during my studies and my research is that in reality, we need to also identify different type of segments. And we are talking about engaged people, what we are calling also engaging people, who are the masses who do not want to be engaged, like participating to non-governmental organization and doing sittings and many other things like those, but they are claiming that they do not want the same world than previously. And they are using applications like voting systems and many other things like those to engage themselves and to also choose the product which are in line with their values. So my question is about, do you think that your approach, which is very interesting about frequent buyers, but I would say, like now, the buyers are changing currently, and they are changing their system of values. So they are changing the criteria to purchase currently because of the crisis, because also of some of the changes, like, for example, economic justice and many other factors. Mm-hmm. Do you think that your approach, which is mainly based on frequent buyers, and those buyers are really deeply changing their behavior, do you think that we can cross-cut something which is coming from your approach, but also something which is coming from the fact that buyers are changing their behaviors?
Yeah, I do. Now, whether or not those adjustments are going to be made based upon consumer research or based upon crossing two different segmentation schemes to find an intersection of people who meet multiple criteria, there are different ways to do this. Let me say what I believe is going on with the analysis of frequent shopper data is in CPG, because it's frequently purchased products, the ability for a consumer to reveal their interest in a brand through their prior purchasing is very strong. However, that's actually the mechanism that's going on. Is it's not about what they bought in the past. It's what their preferences are for the next purchase. Whereas typically in normal times, what they did in the past is a good way of getting to that relationship. I think what you're saying is that in these unusual times or more turbulent times for a variety of reasons, there are reasons why there might be other factors that need to be brought into that equation. And so I think the larger model, if I like revealed all the math of this, I think you'd find that you have the ability to add in these other variables, which could be analyzed through research or separate analysis, but it always has to be done with an eye towards activation, because otherwise it just becomes, an academic exercise, So in other words, if you were to do a survey and you were to try and identify people's concerns about, the economy or health or whatever, but there was no way of then mapping that back into the ad tech, ecosystem, it's not useful. So, so anyway, so that would be my answer. So I think you're right to ask those questions and to remain agile and not just assume that the literal historical purchasing is exactly predictive of the future, especially in these times. But it still is your strongest starting point, I do believe, because, people have a certain, they have a need for habit, they have a need for normal, for being normal. So I think it's the starting hypothesis, which can be proven to need adjustment, but it's the place to start.
I fully agree. In fact, the habits are very strong, but at the same time, with such crises as we are following currently with the coronavirus, we are getting, in fact, very big changes where people are asking themselves, where they should change themselves to accompany that crisis. And we have some research which is based on strong university research about those changes and how that affects the habits, how that affects and changes the behavior of consumers. We are calling that consumers' values research. That's about their values and their system of thinking and how some emotional events are affecting that system of value. And this is the way that they are changing.
Yeah. And I don't know about France, but in the United States, there also was a panic that came about. And you couldn't find, for example, toilet paper in the store for close to 2 months. So wherever you did find it, whenever you found it, you bought as much of it as you could buy. And if they limited you to 2 packages, you bought 2 packages, you went to the car, and you came back into the store to buy 2 more packages. Or I'd get a call from my wife, and she'd say, "Come to the store, they have eggs." You know, so there was a panic and a gaming of a system that was going on. And listen, a lot of people are expecting a second wave of this, so certainly not out of the woods. The other thing I blogged about this a number of months ago is one of the normal tools used in marketing is marketing mix modeling, where you build regression models of historical relationships of advertising channels to sales. Those models are useless because there's no normality in that relationship for at least 18 months, you know? So I'll tell you, one of the craziest things I saw was in about April, I think it was, I was watching TV and I saw a commercial for Lysol on TV and thinking, I can't find Lysol in any store in the New York area, but you're advertising it, you know. All you're doing is you're making me crazy because I want Lysol to disinfect the house, but I can't find it, you know. I mean, we just live in very, you know, unusual times. And of course, on top of that, in the United States, I don't know about how bad it is in France, but in the United States, there's a tremendous amount of, you know, rioting and destruction going on in our cities right now. So, you know, that makes your priorities, going back to your point about values, that makes your priorities very different. Because in the United States, the great majority of people don't worry about their safety and security, you know, but that's the thing, when it's taken away from you, that's what you have to worry about most. So I agree with your point of view about, you know, thinking more broadly and adjusting to the times and not just assuming the past is prologue for the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Henri. Thanks, Joel. We have 2 other questions. Joel, Guillaume stepped in with a question, I think an interesting one.
Okay.
And I'll leave Guillaume open up.
Okay, thank you, Laurent, and thank you, Joel, for sharing the presentation, which was really very interesting and exciting to see the different views coming from you, people like Byron Sharp and others. It's like a battle. That's exciting.
Yeah. Actually, we're battling it out in another forum also, which, by the way, I think you can sign up for if you're interested.
The MMA.
Yeah, the MMA.
Yeah. I mean.
Okay, so I'm the multi-touch attribution expert for the MMA. It's one of my consulting relationships, and so Byron just presented on September 14th, and I'll be presenting on, I think it's October 14th.
Yeah, perfect. Well, my question, I had one question regarding the creative execution. When targeting the heavy buyers or let's say medium buyers, is it about really working on the top of mind and to get the return on advertising spending, or in terms of creative execution, do you need to go to a deeper level because the heavy buyers, they already know the brand, they know the features, and they need to know more?
Okay. That's a great question, and I feel like I owe you money for having asked me this question.
Yes,
I have a lot of thoughts about this. I think that when people ask the question, well, how important is creative? And they give you an answer of, well, it's 80% important or 60% or whatever. It's conflating two very different things. Advertising really does two things. It reminds people of what they already know. And I think the return on ad spend patterns we're seeing are reflective of that effect, reminding people of what they already know. The other thing it does is it makes people think or feel something different about a brand. And that's more the brand building, advertising. And that's what it takes to convert, people who are never buyers into becoming buyers. The thing, so if you were to ask me how important is creative, I would say when it comes to driving return on ad spend, it's actually not very important. And I know that sounds very heretical, like I'm destroying religions as we speak, but I believe that that's the case because people already know this stuff. You're just reminding them of what they know. On the other hand, it becomes more important if you're trying to teach non-buyers or people who prefer other brands something about you that leads them to prefer you more. Now, the interesting thing about the experiment that I shared is that one of the campaigns was just display. Another campaign was just digital video. And the third campaign was a mix of display and video. Now, people don't use display to tell a brand story, but they use video to tell a brand story. The results across the three campaigns were virtually identical. All those patterns, virtually identical. So I looked at that as the glass is half full. And I said, well, if I can get this kind of sales response to advertising, then why don't I always use brand building advertising? This way, I'm getting sales response through targeting, but I'm also reinforcing how people feel about my brand. And for those non-buyers who I might be converting, I'm teaching them something that's new that leads them to have more positive feelings, towards my brand. So I actually believe from these results that brands are over promoting because they are assuming that performance marketing and promotions and big spikes in sales above baseline, that those three things are all the same. And I actually think that's not at all true. I think you can get big spikes through targeting with advertising without making offers and with using brand building advertising. Now, would a promotion on top of that drive a little extra sales response? Probably, but if I'm showing you, there's actually, I didn't go into the full segmentation, but there was one segment called the Persuadables. They actually had 16 times the return on ad spend of anyone who was not in that segment. 16 times. Well, I don't care what your promotion is, it's not going to be able to significantly outperform 16 times. So anyway, so I really have a quite different philosophy about this that I think is, that a marketer would try a very different approach if they wanted to test out, what it is that I'm presenting as a new framework. So anyway, I'm glad you asked the question about creative, because I think it's very important to separate out these effects and to realize that targeting and creative can work together. Targeting produces the short-term response, and then the creative produces that multiplier through brand building effects. But also remember that in a digital age, brand building can start with the purchase.
Yeah.
They make the purchase, they look on the website, They look on a brand's Facebook page, whatever, and you build the brand after the purchase, not just before. That's another reason why the traditional model is not right. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you, Joel. We have another question, but as a follow-up of that, of established brands versus non-established brands, because one you will review, but when can you start actually implementing that strategy? Because that assumes that you need to have an already established brand franchise with a certain amount of returning users. That's one. Or do you encourage having marketers run two types of strategies at the same time? To attract young buyers with maybe a different flow of creatives or different strategy overall from a media standpoint, and at the same time, go for more, loyal buyers or heavy buyers. But the question is, when you start doing that, do you have any back data that shows that is more effective for really established brand, or just maybe thoughts around that?
Sure, I'll give you my thoughts. So I didn't specifically, the use cases that were in this study were all established brands that were relatively stable.
Yeah.
Strictly speaking, it wasn't a new brand launch situation, and it wasn't a restage of an existing brand. So, what I can do is I can extrapolate from, what was learned into those situations. The first point is, you're exactly right that to have heavy and moderate buyers to target, you need to have an established franchise already. You need to be an existing brand. So when a brand is new, being launched, or where its performance is so poor that it needs to relaunch itself as if it were a new brand, then even though the ad response is not as great among non-buyers, you have no choice but to bring your message out to a broader population. However, I developed a model which shows that among the pool of non-buyers, which is basically 100% when a brand is first being launched, among the pool of non-buyers, there is a subset of consumers who are much more likely to become triers of the brand than other non-buyers. So if you're able to model, this goes back, I guess, to my first comment, that it's nice to have historical data to predict likely propensity at a consumer level in the future, but you don't always have that. And you don't have it for a new brand, but what you do have is you have certain signals that would allow you to differentiate some consumers from others. So for example, going back to frequent shopper data, if you knew somebody was loyal to some other brand, or you knew they were a lighter category buyer, or maybe not responsive to promotions, they're much less likely to become a trier of your brand than if they're not loyal to something, or if they're a heavy buyer because they're in the market much more frequently. Or let's say, many new products, the majority of new products are actually line extensions. So the parent name is known. If someone is not a buyer of the parent versus somebody being a buyer of the parent, there's a huge difference in their probability of trying the new line extension or franchise extension, because the halo effect of the brand image is very powerful. So that's something that I have done work with, on in the past. So, I would go through the shopper data for that. And then the other point, I forget who made the question about, values and that type of thing. A brand has values. A brand has needs that it's addressing. So to whatever extent you can target consumers who would appear to be aligned to that, you should go after that, because brands, typically are going to get 10, 20% trial. I mean, above 20% is really a lot, right? So you don't need to think that your world is all 100% of consumers. If you can unpack that into the 40% who are more likely to be triers of your brand, that's where you would want to concentrate your effort.
Okay, Merci Joël.
Avec plaisir.
Je pense qu'il y a encore une question. On a dépassé notre temps, mais if there is an additional question, please feel free to step in. Salma, you asked me if you're still around.
Yeah, yes. Hello, hello, Laurent, Florence. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
I am very pleased to meet you again in this webinar. And so I don't know if my question is really, in fact, I am today responsible of marketing and sales in a new big transshipment port in Morocco. It's under construction. It's called Nador West Med Port Authority. It's like Tangimed. I don't know if you know Tangimed Port Authority, or it's like Al Jazeera Port. It's not about port, import and export port for the need of Morocco. It's an international transshipment port oriented for having a part of the traffic, the Mediterranean traffic. So we have terminals for hydrocarbon. We target to have 50 million tons of hydrocarbon. We have a terminal of containers. We target to have 3 million 20 equivalent units. And this port is in a free zone adjacent to a logistics zone and an industrial zone. So my work is to attract international investors in the port to buy terminals like, for example, CMA CGM, like Maersk, like HMM, Hyundai Merchant Marine, to buy terminals, and then in the logistics zone to attract customers, clients in the logistics area that will handle the cargoes in this area, and also in the industrial area to attract, for example, investors in automotive industry like Renault and PSA that are already installed in Morocco, renewable energy like Gamesa, for example. So we did a lot of strategic studies, and we continue to do it with Drowry. I don't know if you know them, Drowry, Lixcap, Wood Mackenzie, and Valiance. It was about feasibility, financial studies, and also to guide us about the activities we can attract in this port, especially that's located in the northeastern region of Morocco in Nador city. So my question today is about territorial marketing, because here we are not talking about B2C, but about I think B2B and B2G governments also. So and also how to build a port brand, because here in Morocco, ports are like administrations. They are not viewed like private companies. So in the marketing and sales department, we need to prepare a strategy, a marketing and sales strategy to attract investors. So what we did until now is preparing presentations for each segment of investors, talking about the advantages of the port as a free zone.
Salma, yes. I'm sorry to interrupt because
it's not yeah.
Because we are running on time, and I'm sorry to be. I don't want to be awkward, but it's if you have a question, I think it's. And we understood that the specific situation you're in, but what is your question to Joel?
I am about territorial marketing. What are the latest tendencies in territorial marketing?
Marketing, territorial marketing. Yeah, you familiar with that, Joel? Or is that too far away from?
I mean, No, it would be, it's away from what I normally, you know, think about or work on. The only thing I would, I mean, I don't know if this is relevant at all or not, but I could tell you that one of the ways of doing the targeting that I'm talking about actually is old school, which is that in the United States, if you look at a brand's share, or what's sometimes called the brand development index, you know, city by city or state by state, it can be really different. So another thing that this research suggests is that you know, there's always this question of, should I go after a market that already likes me, or should I go after a market that doesn't like me and I should try and convert them? My research would suggest that you'd want to leverage the positive feelings from the segment, the market, you know, whatever identifiable slice of the demand you can go after where people are more favorable. That's where you'd want to concentrate your efforts. So I think the business you're in is very different from any business I've ever been in. But one thing I will say is I did once do a large brand equity and segmentation study in the professional area. It was B2B, but what it really was in medical. Now you would think, you know, doctors and dentists would be completely rational in their buying, right?
Yes.
They want the lowest price for things. Not at all true. They are people. And that comes with all the emotions and the irrationality and the brand preferences and behavioral economics. It applies just as much to them. So I have a hunch that, you know, if there's any advice I can give you that might be useful, just keep in mind that a lot of these principles apply in B2B because, you know, you're building brands in those spaces also. So, you know, people never have as much time to do cold calculations of every possible alternative they have. So, you know, maybe that's helpful. So I would think a lot of these principles in some way apply to your business, but I don't know enough about your business to specifically advise you.
Merci, Joel.
Thank you.
Merci,
My
Salma.
pleasure. Yeah.
It's already 6:30 our local time. It's 12:30 New York time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that some people already stepped out. It was actually good. So thank you very much. Maybe if someone wants to have a final word, please feel free to do so. It's nice because I see people that I haven't seen for a long time. I'm seeing Anthony there,
including me.
Yeah. I think last time I saw you was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I came to the ARF.
Yeah. We were going to get together once when I came to Paris, but we
Yes.
never quite made our calendars
come
together. But yeah, no, it's been over 10 years.
Yeah,
Right.
it's been a long time. Merci, merci to everyone. But I have an idea. I will connect with you as we get finished. We'll put you in touch with someone that I think may be interested in that. He joined, but he arrived too late. I'll share the contact with you.
Okay.
And to everyone, thanks for taking the time. Thanks to Joel. It's quite, you know, Joel. When I said to Joel when you know he shared the deck with me, he told me, you know, what do you think? I said, you know, it sounds obvious and straightforward. And he actually answered with a very nice catch from Einstein. And he said, Joel told me something, the following thing. He said, it is important to make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. And indeed, although it sounds straightforward and obvious, it's not actually simpler to actually think along those new lines. But I guess thanks for inspiring us, Joel, and
My pleasure.
allowing us to actually get going in another direction. So merci beaucoup, Joel. There'll be a replay available in the coming days when I'll have time to actually set it up.
Okay.
And with that said, merci à tous. Thank you. Thanks for everyone. Muchas gracias a los que están en Barcelona también.
Very good, Laurent.
And speak to you soon. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for.
And Anthony, feel free to connect with me offline. I'll be happy to catch up. Joel, stay on the line.
Okay.
And we'll catch up with you. Okay.
Thanks for organizing. Very interesting.
Yeah,
You want
and
me
feel free to come back and join and extend. The program is online, and there'll be many new speakers coming in beyond Joel, and with the quality of Joel too. So thanks very much, guys, for joining.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Joel?
Yeah. Do you want me to stay on the line?
Yeah,
Or?
we can say we're just the two of us. Merci
Okay.
beaucoup, Joel. It was interesting. You had, I think, one or two questions that were hopefully interesting. I'm going to put you in touch with someone that I made a connection with about a few months back. He has something great. He's been approaching me a while back and didn't come back to me. So he's set up. He's a French guy that has been working in Asia for many years. Okay, and he's been he built a consumer-based panel where he tracks sales of perfumes. Okay, so that reminds you of your NPD time, I guess.
Yeah, that's the category they were in. Yeah.
He doesn't capture it at the store level, but he captures it at the consumer level with an app. Okay, and he has over 1 million people using the app. It's big. It's actually very. It seems to be very. The company name is called the Perfumist. The THE, the Perfumist, and what it does, it captures what people buys, and it trying to match what people buys with a profile of consumers. A profile of consumers by defining the type of scents, the type of perfumes they're in, and he does match that back with what they buy. What is really interesting is the stores are all pissed off. Why? Because it's coming and driven by the consumer, and they use the app as a way to get recommendation on what scents, what perfume best match the profiles.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting. So the reason I'm saying that is because I know you've been, it's when you talked to me about that, I didn't think about you, but I'm glad we connected because he has a huge database. He sells data. I don't know exactly in which forms to clients, but it could be, end users, brands, but he's also selling that more and more to distributors. And they're buying it more and more. Why? Because he has access to data, but he's not rep, but has value because his size is increasing. When I talked to him about 2 months ago, before the summer, I felt that he's not a data guy, number one. What he needs, I believe, is products, things that he can sell repeatedly over and over, both to brand builders and distributors alike. And as you were speaking, I said, shit, I saw this name coming up, and he stepped down, and I said, I need to put them in touch, and maybe we can find a way to work together because he's based in France. His business is global. He's happened to be based near Nice. He's a very nice guy. He's an entrepreneur. He's been building businesses in Asia and specifically in Thailand. He's been selling perfumes for years, and he built a perfume franchise that he resold many years back. So he knows the industry from inside, but both from a sales side. Okay.
Yeah.
It
sounds like he's got an interesting business idea. So this is already a commercial venture, and he's ready.
Yes, that's a commercial venture.
Yeah.
That's a commercial venture. I didn't come back to me because he didn't come back to me. But we have a connection because our sons are in the same school, in the same engineering school. So that's the way I know him. So I I don't have a business connection, but it's a better connection because we have a mutual connection. Our sons are studying the same engineering school, and it's my son that introduced me to him.
Yeah.
Because my son is doing, well, to make the story short, my son he's doing a lot of things on the side, shooting video on YouTube, building podcast, and he's interviewing entrepreneurs. And he's one of the guys I interviewed, and I listened to the guy and I said, "Fuck, he has a very interesting background." And then I get in touch with him. I said, "I'm Benjamin Dad. We should talk," and we did. He's a great guy. So check out. I pass along in chat the name of the app. It's called the Perfumist. You can download it. And you can look at it, and I will try to, try and look at it. And I think there are things to do because he has a lot of data. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'll take a look, and then I'd be happy to explore it, and we could have
never know.
Three-way conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I can set up the point, and then he knows NPD obviously.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. He knows the field, but without very much being in this field yet. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'd be interested. Yeah, I'd be interested in doing that.
Cool.
Sure. One of the things about this, like the session we just had, or the conversation we might have with him, is you learn about your own things when you try and explain it to other people. So this was a learning experience for me also. Just to see, what words were coming out of my mouth, how was I articulating it? Was there a part that I was less comfortable with another part? Until you try and teach somebody something, you're never really 100% sure that you yourself know it, right? So,
but it's really interesting you say that, because I did catch that from your email yesterday or the day before about your 10-year anniversary, because I relate to some of the things you wrote when you said, although it's difficult, because you're passionate and you like what you do, you get into the things and get to learn. But once you gather the knowledge, I believe what I learned in business, the critical part is not to know, but make others know about what you know. And to complement what you just said, I just said that to the student because I was in class this afternoon and told them, think about your LinkedIn profile. You relate to it the way you believe you should relate to it, but maybe you should talk the language of the market by actually rewording the way you put through your description, by using the words that people are looking to, when they want to recruit new graduates like you. So I'm glad
it's that part about, not taking on only the assignments that are comfortable, but they kind of going out on the edge. I'll tell you a story. Around January, February, I picked up a new client who is doing some very advanced work in ad tech, specifically with respect to targeting. So they asked me to consult with them and advise them on their procedures and write a white paper and so on. Well, they have these brilliant data scientists working on this data set that was completely new to me. And I'm thinking, how am I going to establish expertise that's needed to bring any value to this? So those assignments always start like that. Like, how am I going to bring any value to this? So one of the things I did was I realized that there were certain branches of, statistics and mathematical modeling that would be relevant. I began to study this and refresh myself on some of these things, especially since you can't travel anywhere anyways. I haven't been on a plane or, whatever. So somehow I've acquired a level of understanding and ability to apply things that I learned in college. I could see the notes in my textbooks from when I was in college, but it was stuff like the usefulness of eigenvectors and eigenvalues and things like that. Well, I see the notes, but back then it was always blocks at the ends of springs. It had nothing to do with life as I knew it. And now I'm actually using all these things for different assignments. I'm using Bayesian analysis And
Yeah, I saw something on what you described, you know, hidden Markov chain models.
yeah, yeah,
We used that 4 years ago with Antoine because to tackle the heterogeneous probability of consumers acting differently across time,
yeah.
and it worked very, very well.
Yeah, yeah. I took switching data from the numerator data.
Yeah.
I created a switching matrix.
Yeah.
I said, so the way it works is you take a brand to brand switching matrix. So I had 12 brands
Yeah.
looking at the matrix of from to to purchases, okay? So the way it works is when you get the switching matrix, if you transpose it and you calculate the eigenvectors and eigenvalues,
Yeah.
eigenvector associated with an eigenvalue of 1 gives you the steady state.
Yeah.
It's just the way linear algebra works, right? So what I did was I said, well, if these brands are in steady state, what would be interesting is to think, don't give me the market shares. I don't want to know the shares. I just want the matrix.
Yeah.
I should be able to tell you what the shares are for every one of these brands by calculating the eigenvector associated with the eigenvalue of 1. So I did that. The correlation was 0.98.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, so I'm using it for that. I'm using it for some digital behavior data
Yeah.
that I'm looking at now, which is more about like journeys, digital journeys, either resulting in a purchase or not. Yeah, I'm using hidden Markov. I'm using, the thing I'm doing now, this white paper I'm working on with the MMA, it's about the application of beta distributions.
Yeah.
So like the stuff that Byron Sharp does is based on the Dirichlet, which is like a multinomial beta.
Yeah.
I don't like it as much because it leads you to aggregated thinking, not disaggregated thinking. So what I did was, and also some of the assumptions in the Dirichlet are actually not good, like that there's no market structure.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bad assumption for most product categories.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to fit these beta distributions to the actual data. And so I've been working on some stuff that's, I mean, this is the white paper that we're going to come out with. So as soon as I come out with it, I'll share
with me. But along those lines, I'm surprised, you know, or maybe you did not investigate, but I'm surprised that some academics never try to work with you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I know, you know, you mentioned Mike. I know Mike Hansens.
Yeah.
And I met Mike many years back, and I always thought about him as quite open to the professional world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's good. And we're probably going to bring him in to help us review the white paper when we write it, because he has a relationship with New Star, and New Star is the key partner to the MMA for this particular effort. So yeah, I expect to work with him. And I have good relationships with a number of academics. Whether or not I've actually worked with them on an assignment or not, I'm not sure.
No, but you know, but even if it's not from an assignment standpoint, if it's not from an assignment standpoint, but maybe a paper standpoint, you know, because they need to publish.
Well, I mean, actually, yeah, I mean, I have in the past.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was a little puppy, in 1978, the first paper I ever published in a professional journal was co-authored with a well-known academic at the time from Columbia, Marty Starr. And then the next paper I published, I co-authored with Frank Bass.
Okay.
So, you know,
I know. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool stuff that we co-authored that together. And then he brought in one of his PhD students at the time to do a lot of the heavy lifting, someone named Wilfred von Honecker, who I think has developed his own reputation, is pretty well known also in marketing. So anyway, so I did that. But, you know, when I was at Unilever, I had less demands on my time. So I was a little more free to be able to do that. When I went to NPD and you're a supplier and you have to sell stuff and work on projects, it's a little bit different. So, So anyway, but yeah, no, I'm open to those kinds of exchange of ideas. I mean, that's
Yeah. So what I'll do with Frederic, his name is, I will follow up with him, and I'll touch base with him, and if he'll be pretty open, and then I will set up a freeway call and introduce you, and we can do a Zoom, and you never know where things could lead. Okay.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity.
Merci beaucoup, Joel. Merci. It's not about the quantity of contacts, it's about the quality of contact among certain targeted people. Okay, so that was to say that we're about, I think, 13 or 14. So, but hopefully you got something out of it. So
I did. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you very much. À bientôt. Merci, Joel.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.